Earlier this offseason, I shared with you how important I feel it is for the Sacramento Kings to get off to a strong start. But should there be concerns about some growing pains or a feeling out period when incorporating DeMar DeRozan into the Kings offense? Jason Ross from SacTown Sports 1140 and, of course, Kings radio analyst. He joins me to discuss that and more right here on Locked On Kings.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all offseason long. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Matt George. I have the privilege of being your host here. I'm a Sacramento sports anchor and reporter for ABC 10 News. And the best way that you could support this show this season is to listen every day. Now, I know that is a commitment for a lot of people, and I have some of you that are everydayers. Don't miss an episode, and I appreciate you so much. But I cannot even begin to emphasize to you, if you listen to this podcast, let's say on average once a week, so 4 times a month, just listening to it one more time a week makes a tremendous, it doubles our listenership for that month because of you and because of you taking that time. So I have some people ask me, hey, how do I support the podcast, Matt? That is the number one way to do it. Just listen, try and listen as much as you can every single day. I do not take those listeners and that time for granted. And I promise to always do my best to give you the best show and the best Kings coverage and the best Kings podcast that you will find anywhere else. And one of the reasons why I'm able to, I think, take on that challenge or even live up to that challenge is because of the amazing friends here in the Sacramento area, in the Kings media landscape, even in all of the national media landscape that I've made through my career covering the Sacramento Kings. One of those friends is more of a mentor of mine. That's Jason Ross, who, if you didn't know, he's the original host of Locked On Kings. When Locked On Kings first started, the birth of the Locked On Podcast Network, Jason Ross was the initial host for Locked On Kings when it first got started. He handed the keys over to me. That was like 6 or 7 years ago or something like that now. And we've built it to where it is. So I'm so thankful and so grateful to Jason Ross. Always love having him here on Locked On Kings. We have a fun conversation for you today, so I hope you enjoy it. This offseason is almost at an end. We're a week away from the start of Sacramento Kings training camp, a month away from the start of the season itself. This offseason has been awfully long, I should say. It's been good, I think, in many ways for the Sacramento Kings, but it's felt awfully long for impatient Kings fans like myself. Jason Ross has a number of things to help me get through the offseason, from his fantastic radio show with Carmichael Dave on SacTown Sports 1140 to his calling of Sac State Hornets football, which he's been doing an excellent job over the last couple of weeks. And now, Jay Ross, you're back here on the Locked On Kings podcast, where your journey began, right? Can I say that? Can I claim that?
Sure.
Locked On was the birthplace of Jason Ross's career. We'll just go with that. Jay Ross, nice enough to join me here on Locked On Kings. Jay Ross, this offseason has been obnoxiously long, it feels like. They all feel like that at this time of year, but this one has been just too long. Have you felt the same way? Are you ready for this season as much as everybody else is?
So, Matt, you're not rewatching all of last year's games. It's just to kind of get your fix, or the year before, the playoff games. Like, you need some basketball in your life, don't you?
I'll every once in a while I'll journey back and watch like top moments and games that I know end well. There's about a good pretty much 20 games towards the end of the season that I do not need to relive. And anything, if I've seen anything at all to do with the New Orleans Pelicans, I've immediately turned around and walked the other way. Like, that team makes me sick.
You don't want to watch the Pistons home game from last year or some of the greatest hits of the Kings of 2023-24.
Oh, too many flubs.
Yeah.
Too many flubs that the Kings need to get rid of this year. And hopefully the addition of DeMar DeRozan will help them get rid of a lot of those flubs. J. Ross, I wanted to ask you about the start to this season, because I'm of the belief, first and foremost, like I think the number that I've kind of put on the Kings, everybody's saying get back to the playoffs and win a playoff series and stuff like that. But I actually put like a physical number on the Kings that I think this is what they need to get to. This is the goal for this year. And that goal for me is a number that actually Mike Brown and members of the Kings themselves have brought up, which is 50 wins. Like 50 wins to me is the threshold of that's where this team needs to get to. If they're going to accomplish that, it's no easy feat. I feel like the start to the season is tremendously important. It's not like if they, let's say, go 2-4 in their first 6 games. We saw them go 0-4 to start the season 2 years ago when they made the playoffs. So it's not like if they do that, then their season is over, right? But getting off to a strong start, I think, is essential compared to maybe some of these other teams, like maybe the Phoenix Suns or the LA Lakers or these other teams that maybe can feel they can start slow and ramp up as the playoffs get closer and closer. I don't think the Kings are in that boat yet. How do you view the start of the season for the Kings and the importance of this team kind of hitting the ground running?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, first off, I like the goal of 50. I think if you get to 50, that keeps you in the top 6. Now, that could be 1, that could be 6. I mean, I don't know. We don't know where that'll shake out this year. But a couple things I think they have going in their favor. Just so many guys coming back. This is a group, by and large, there's continuity. It's the same coach. You know, there's different coaches, but it's Mike Brown. It's his thought process. It's year 3 with him. De'Aaron and Sabonis have been together with a lot of time and a lot of minutes on the floor with Keegan. And now that Herter's back and Monk, yeah, DeMar DeRozan's a big addition and a big piece to add in. But he's been on restarts with the Spurs and with the Bulls. And so he's kind of already gone through it. So I don't think that's a crazy thought. Really, when I've always thought about 50 too, I know coaches and Mike Brown does this. Matt does the games in 5-game chunks. Mm-hmm. You go 3-2 every time, you're at 48 basically, or 49-ish. So in one of those stretches, are you 4-1? I mean, that's not a crazy task to think of. And you just got to avoid the 3 and 4 game losing streaks, certainly any of the long ones. But I think this team is very capable of it. And what's scary about the West is I think a lot of teams are capable of it. So with that being said, I mean, my stance, Matt, has been, I honestly think, and this is way broad of a spectrum, I think they can finish first, but I think they could finish 12th. And, you know, people are like, oh, you mean out of it? I go, no, completely out. And not meaning, you know, last year, a few things go wrong and they're not even 9th. And some things went wrong. There was only a 2-win difference from the year before where they were 3rd. So I think it's that competitive. I think it's that balance going in. And then as injuries happen to, hopefully not the Kings, but other teams, I think it'll start to shake out. But I think it's that wide of a variety of where they could finish. First
time in the NBA where Wild West is not a cliche. Like genuinely is wide open, and anybody, like there could be a lot of teams that could win the West that you would just be like, yeah, okay. Or a lot of teams that'll come out of the West and represent the West in the NBA Finals. You're like, yeah, okay, we'll see how they get there. But one of the things you said that I think is really important that I hope the Kings will lean on heavily is the fact that, yes, DeMar DeRozan is a new addition, and we'll get into how much incorporating DeRozan may change or may not change what the Sacramento Kings do, especially offensively. But with the exception of DeRozan, your core is the exact same, right? No matter who you start at the 2-guard spot, we know 4 out of the 5 starters are set in stone. We'd be shocked if any one of Fox, Sabonis, DeRozan, and Keegan didn't start. The starting shooting guard spot is up for grabs with Kevin Huerter, Keon Ellis, and I would like to throw Malik Monk's name into the hat, but knowing Mike Brown, maybe he's not going to get that opportunity. That being said, all 3 of those guys have been here for the last couple of seasons. So they should understand each other. They should be able to together hit the ground running. Now, that's not always realistic, but I'm wondering how much the Kings should maybe expect, and Kings fans should maybe expect, growing out pains and a feeling out process. And with the incorporation of DeMar DeRozan, in addition to some of the newer faces on this Kings roster, and maybe trying to pick up more of what Mike Brown is trying to incorporate with this team in training camp, if we should expect that the Sacramento Kings may not look as sharp as they should right out of the gate.
I would be a little surprised if they don't, based on exactly what you said, that continuity. It's not only just last year. This is really 2 years running for your main group of Fox, Sabonis, Keegan Murray. Let's throw in Monk. Let's throw in Huerter, even Trey Lyles. Like, that group has played so many games, so many minutes as a core together, and the same coach. So there's a huge advantage in that. Other teams have had some shakeups and different players that it just sometimes take some time. So incorporating DeRozan will be a factor, but again, I'm going to go back to the fact that he had to do that in San Antonio, and he did it well. He had to do that in Chicago, seemingly very well. And he's just played too much basketball. He's too proven. I think, he's played on Olympic type teams. He's been in this kind of situation. And I don't think that Fox and Sabonis and the rest won't be able to handle it. So the way they're designed is to create some space and lanes for guys and shooting lanes. And I think that fits nicely for DeRozan. So I don't think they'll be that much of a learning curve, really. I think they'll be able to start off quickly, which I think will be important if, in fact, that range from 1st to 12th is true. You don't want to waste any time if you don't have to.
Like I said at the top of the show, today's episode of Locked On Kings is brought to you by Gametime. This is the #1 app or website that you need to be using in order to get your tickets, whether it's Kings tickets or concert tickets or NFL tickets, comedy shows, theatrical productions. Doesn't matter what it is. Gametime has those. And Gametime has a new feature called Gametime Picks. It makes getting tickets even easier than before. Gametime Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Let's say it's a Wednesday night game, Kings versus Bucks, right? I want to go and I want good seats at a good value. But maybe this is because it's a Wednesday night game. Maybe there's a lot of tickets available to this game, right? So you scroll through, and instead of wasting time, Gametime Picks is going to show you not just the most expensive tickets at the very top. They're going to show you the best tickets for your value in a bunch of different areas, so you can choose what works for you in your budget, where you want to sit. It makes it all so much easier. Plus, the all-in pricing feature, which is phenomenal. It shows you all of your total cost up front with no surprise fees at checkout. They have incredible seat views, panoramic views from your seat, so you'll know exactly what your view is going to look like. And the lowest price guarantee or Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. What time is it? Gametime. That first 5-game mini season, as Mike Brown calls it, let's say during those first 5 games, like one of these things can be true, that the Sacramento Kings offense comes out shooting lights out or playing really well and gets back to where they were a couple of seasons ago, where they're one of the top offensive rating teams in the league. They're moving the basketball. They're scoring at a high rate. Or the other part, or the other thing that could be true is the Kings defense to end last season, that physical defense that just kind of turn this team around, at least on that side of the ball that Mike Brown was able to scratch and claw his way to. That defense immediately reappears, and maybe even there's slight growth upon that. I'm not expecting a lot of growth upon that, but slight growth upon that. If you could pick one of the two that you would like to see or would be more beneficial to see in those first 5 games, which way are you leaning?
It's interesting. I think my gut tells me it would be the defense, but I'm going off the last 2 years. Like 2 years ago, they were the best offense we'd ever seen until last year when the league all went past them. And then last year, look, the offense was still good, but it was kind of middle of the pack. And the defense, we'd always go, could you imagine if they were 25th, 21st, 20th in defense? Well, they got there and got above that. And maybe had they really got into a playoff series and were fully healthy, maybe that would have shown itself. Or to one your point to start this, if they just avoided New Orleans. I mean, that was truly a matchup problem. And that also might be the factor for all these teams in the West later. I mean, whoever gets in, it's kind of who you play and how you're playing. Because, I mean, before the year, I would not have picked Minnesota and OKC to be the top 2 of the top teams. And then by the end, Dallas is the one that gets through. It's kind of who you have, when them, when you're healthy. And at the end, the matchups you get, for whatever reason, the Kings did well against Denver, swept the Lakers. I don't expect them to go 4-0 against the Lakers this year. It might. I mean, a lot of Kings fans are reacting going, I don't think we can beat New Orleans. Well, they couldn't beat last year's New Orleans team. I don't know about this year. I mean, so every year is kind of different. Every opportunity is different. But I think they've got so many things going in their favor going into the year. I guess all that being said, defense is what I wanted to say, but I think let's go back to being a fun, freewheeling, unique, gifted offense, because I think that fits more of their core personnel better.
I'm 100% with you. And it's not that you and I don't completely subscribe to the Mike Brown way of thinking of like, look, you can try and outscore everybody in the playoffs. You're not going to win a championship that way. I have full faith in Mike Brown that what he's saying is true and trust that and believe in that 100%. And clearly the Sacramento Kings do too, because they just signed him to a contract extension. That being said, you look at like actions speak louder than words sometimes. And you look at the actions of Monty McNair and the Kings front office, and time again, it's bolstering and retooling and hanging on to the offensive weapons of this very offensively gifted roster, right? You add DeMar DeRozan. DeMar's not doing much for you defensively. Let's just be honest. But as an isolation go-to scorer in big moments, whether it's down the stretch or hell, even late in the shot clock on a broken possession, right? He's a game changer, in my opinion, for the Sacramento Kings. So everything the Kings have done is suggested they want to get back to offensively where they were last season. And Mike Brown even told us while they were emphasizing improving defensively last season, it wasn't like he was abandoning the offense, and it wasn't like he was okay with the offense dropping from first in offensive rating to, I think, 14th. So I think Mike knows and recognizes how important it is offensively for this team to be one of the elite in the league. And I think the reality is it's maybe an oversimplification, J. Ross, but if you were to tell me the Sacramento Kings could compete for a championship this year, I would tell you it's because offensively they were as untouchable as maybe they were 2 years ago, or even more beyond that offensively teams could not figure out how to stop them. That's the only way that makes any realistic sense toward this team making a kind of dream run.
Well, to your point, look at Indiana last year. They had a special offensive season. They weren't a great defensive team, but they made a nice playoff run. And the other part of this is, yeah, I agree. I think the best way they can get better is through a dynamic offense, but also demanding that the current guys that they're going to play, the main guys that'll play, have to play better defense. Mm-hmm. And I think we saw some of that. De'Aaron at times can play good defense. Keegan Murray's a good defender. Maybe Keon's incorporated a little bit more. And to kind of go back, Matt, I was thinking about this as an example. Let's just say the Kings added Matisse Thybulle. And then, I don't know, I'm thinking of a good interior defender, but I don't know how much they play. I mean, I think they're going to lean on, there's Malik, there's Herter, there's Fox, there's Murray, DeRozan, Sabonis. Like, people want rim protection. Great idea, good theory, good concept. Sabonis is going to get those minutes. If not, then it's Lyles. I just think they like their best skilled players to play their most minutes. I think that makes a lot of sense. It's not the biggest of teams. And last year they figured out how to be better defensively. So, I think that's the avenue. Be great offensively and good defensively and go forward.
I was having a conversation with Kyle Madsen yesterday about this, and we essentially I had this image in my brain of like a scale, right? And on one side is the importance of the Sacramento Kings offense playing the way that we know that they can play and playing how they've been the last couple of seasons, essentially. And the other side is the incorporation of DeMar DeRozan and DeMar playing DeMar's game and what carries more weight. And to me, it's the Sacramento Kings, the way offensively they've been playing. Essentially, it's more important, I think, for DeMar to come in and find his fit with how the Sacramento Kings have been playing and want to play than it is for the Sacramento Kings to welcome DeMar in and change how they've played around him. The good news is, because of what you've talked about, the example you gave of DeMar, and he's bounced around from a couple different teams to simply playing with someone like Domantas Sabonis. I believe incorporating DeRozan into what the Sacramento Kings do now is not going to be something that completely changes or looks drastically different. I think it just adds a layer to it. Doesn't change any of the layers if we're looking at it that way. Do you feel the same way? How do you expect the incorporation of DeMar DeRozan, or what do you expect that to look like with this Kings offense?
So the vision you had there about the scale, the one I had when they added DeRozan, I went back to the last game of last year. The kryptonite was New Orleans. That final game where they got eliminated in the play-in game, to me, looking back at it, and I haven't watched the game again, felt so winnable. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think New Orleans was that dynamic. They were better than the Kings that night. They deserved to win. There's no shenanigans or anything. But they did a good job, and we knew that Valanciunas was a player that kind of bothered Sabonis. Sabonis is so critical to the Kings' success. All right, so now it's on to De'Aaron. De'Aaron was great. De'Aaron was great in that game. Now the next layer, Keegan. Keegan got kind of taken out of his game. Yep. Now Monk. Well, Monk's not available. Herter, he's not available. They were a little bit thinner. So immediately I went to that game and said, man, would have been nice to have DeMar DeRozan. So in that type of game where maybe Sabonis is taken away or Fox is taken away or some other piece. I mean, I think Murray's going to be important too. Then you can kind of go, you know what? They can't guard everybody. And here's DeMar. It's DeMar's game. And I think there'll be some games that you'll literally go, not completely ISO, because I don't think that's the way they do it. But, hey, he carried the team in the fourth quarter. carried the team for the game. He'll have that ability to do that. And they also have to then find ways on just through the 82 that he was just seamlessly involved as well. But I think there'll be certain games where Fox has taken over. And I think there'll be certain games where DeMar DeRozan will be able to take over. And what a luxury that is.
There were two major criticisms, I suppose, or questions that people were asking of of DeMar DeRozan coming to Sacramento and the Kings going out and getting DeMar. Two of them, I should say, that carried weight for me. The being concerned about the 2031 pick swap or being concerned about losing Harrison Barnes, I don't care. Like, all of a sudden now to these people, Harrison Barnes was a big loss for the Sacramento Kings when he was playing here, and they were ripping him to shreds saying the Kings need to replace him. So the Kings go out and replace him with a multi-time all-star, and now it's not good. But the two that I listened to and I thought about and I've talked about a little bit, one was spacing related, right? Okay, you incorporate DeMar DeRozan. He does not have much of a three-point shot. Domantas Sabonis, the Kings would like him to shoot threes more. He's capable of shooting more threes, but that clearly isn't his game. And his first instinct is to look to find others before looking for himself. And then I got to thinking, okay, if this were 2 or 3 years ago, I would be more concerned about the spacing, because at that time, De'Aaron Fox would put up a 3 or 2, but you never really were concerned or worried about De'Aaron Fox killing you from the perimeter. Now, I'm not saying I want De'Aaron to take more 3-pointers than he's taking shots at the rim and using his speed to get down low and hopefully get to the foul line and convert at the foul line. I'm just thinking like the incorporation of DeMar DeRozan opens the green light for De'Aaron Fox to shoot that high volume of threes more freely, I feel, and the Kings will be less reliant on him to knock down those threes in addition to getting to the basket. There are going to be games this season I have in my mind, Jay Ross, that DeMar DeRozan is tearing up the middle so much that De'Aaron Fox is getting open looks from the perimeter. Same thing with Keegan, same thing with Malik. So I like the idea of De'Aaron kind of taking on a lot of that floor spacing responsibility when he's on the floor with DeMar.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I heard the same narrative, and it's fair to question, but I don't know what does that look like to someone that's questioning the spacing of the team. I mean, I still envision Domantas Sabonis at the top of the key with a lot of dribble handoffs, and why wouldn't DeRozan come off some of those or fakes? I don't picture DeRozan parking it in the paint.
Right.
I mean, yeah, he shoots more twos than he does threes, but he also starts from outside the perimeter generally and kind of does this off dribbles where the spacing can still be there. So I don't really envision that being a problem. I still think of it as a strength when you add just superior talent, knowledge of how to get to the line, knowledge of how to get a bucket when you need one. And they got a couple guys now that can do that. And it doesn't even have to be a take your turn thing, but it can be at different times. And then there'll be a nice luxury where, hey, you know what, De'Aaron, DeMar's got it going. Why don't you, that rest that was 3 minutes is now 6 minutes. And maybe you're stretching out and saving some minutes for guys. And then there might be some fun combinations that we're just not even thinking of. Like, wow, DeRozan and Monk are great together. I don't know what that combination will be, but they'll figure that out. There'll be some good things that I think. Again, I go back to the offense. I think it has a chance to be really, really good.
Locked On Kings is also brought to you by FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, or you just feel like the game's going to go a certain way, or you feel like a player's going to have a good game, or whatever the case may be, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. It's all right there for you. It's easy, it's convenient, and of course, it's fun. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Put $5 on anything. It could be on a football game this weekend, college or pro. It could be on a futures bet with the Sacramento Kings. Whatever it is, put $5 on whatever you want. As soon as you make that bet, boom, $200 in bonus bets in your account. Then you can start to really play and build up that bankroll. And then if you win that $5 bet that you initially put, hey, you're already in the green right there. Go and enjoy FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. DeMar also shoots in the high 30s percentage-wise from corner threes. So it's not like he's absolutely useless on the perimeter, too. You can put him in the corner and feel pretty good about it if you're trying to run a pick and roll with Malik and Sabonis or Fox and Sabonis or whatever else you're trying to run. The other question. Now, I think a lot of this is lazy, but I think it's worth talking about is, the addition of DeMar DeRozan is going to stunt the growth of Keegan Murray. I think there's something there to look at and to explore, but to just assume that that's going to be the case, I feel is lazy. Because if I'm the Sacramento Kings and looking at this from the perspective of Mike Brown and Monte McNair, they don't have time to wait for anybody. And what they know is that in terms of Keegan's ability as a lethal catch and shoot 3-point shooter, as well as now the best, not just the best wing defender on the team, maybe the best defender on the team, period, or at least one of the best defenders on the team. They know now what Keegan can get them in specific areas is good enough to start and play at a high level and have success in Sacramento. So the addition of DeMar DeRozan, to me, maybe it takes the ball out of Keegan's hands in terms of what they were relying upon last season is, we need Keegan to make this offensive jump. We need Keegan to be more of a guy that could create for himself and create his own shot. The Kings would still like that from Keegan, but they're not relying upon it now with the addition of DeMar DeRozan. And if Keegan has to fall back to lighting up the perimeter and catch and shoot 3-pointers, which is, he literally broke the record for 3-pointers as a rookie, broke Steph Curry's record. If that's the case, then that's not a bad thing. Like I'm having a hard time finding the problem.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think we all believe, I'm going to assume for everybody that we all believe that DeRozan's numbers will be better than Harrison Barnes. I think that's a fair statement, whatever that looks like. So naturally, your point total, if you're adding somewhere from a position, there's probably a few less shots somewhere around the board. And I think that's where naturally people may go, well, Keegan's numbers may go down. That probably could be a case. But does that mean his development was stunted? If he becomes that like lockdown elite defender, that'll be of huge value to the team. And to your point, Matt, if he's hitting the threes, maybe at a higher efficiency, where did they go wrong there? I mean, and there'll be some nights where you go, wow, Keegan went for 28. Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, he erupted last year, that crazy game for 47. I don't know that we'll see that, but he can do that. And he can be a guy. And then where all this goes, if all of it goes right and you do get to the postseason, then I'm thinking of other teams like, okay, we got to stop Fox. We got to stop Sabonis. Is it DeRozan? Is it, and I think it leaves you some other things that can become keys in playoff series if you get there. So, based on strictly numbers, I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Keegan's numbers were a little bit less, but I could see him being more efficient and maybe a better defender. Like if he made an all defensive team, who's complaining about that?
Absolutely.
Right? That's better for the team.
Especially when considering his defensive responsibilities. He's going to be the main guy that the Kings throw out against the opposing team's best wing. Like just looking at matchups against the Lakers, looking at matchups against the Suns, like Keegan's the guy that's going to have to try and slow down LeBron or have to try and slow down KD unless the Kings bring in a Jay Crowder or somebody else to somewhat help with that. But even so, they're not going to be playing the minutes that Keegan Murray's playing. Also, I want to correct myself. I think I said Steph Curry's rookie 3-point record. It's Donovan Mitchell's, I believe, was the one that had the 3-point record. That being, we just assume everything 3-pointer has to do with Steph Curry. Another element of this too is, and maybe this is more wishful thinking on my part, J. Ross, but like Keegan spent an entire summer working with De'Aaron Fox, playing one-on-one, and has this massive individual defensive leap from year 1 to year 2 because of working with and guarding one of the fastest, most dynamic guards in the NBA every day, basically, for an entire summer. You mean to tell me that him working with DeMar DeRozan for a year, 2 years, 3 years, however long it is, that DeMar's not going to be able to help Keegan develop as an isolation scorer and someone who can put the ball on the floor and find more of that mid-range game, which the Kings have wanted from Keegan over the last couple of seasons? You mean to tell me that DeMar's not going to help Keegan? I know there's not a boatload of practice time, but I think Keegan can learn a thing or two from DeRozan too. Absolutely. And that's a good guy to learn from. I think the whole group can, to just what he's been through in Toronto, San Antonio, Chicago. You want all that brought into what this group already has in their own culture. And Keegan seemingly has been a bit of a sponge, Matt, from other guys. And then it's obviously his own gifts. I mean, I did not think he would do what he's doing defensively. I hope people appreciate that he does guard LeBron to KD to Steph. There's not many people in this league that do that. And of course he doesn't stop them all completely, but he does a good job on the speed guys, on the bigger guys. And that's a valuable weapon to have when
I would say Sabonis and some others have more issue. Maybe DeRozan will. But if you have Fox and Murray locking in pretty consistently, and then you got those team defensive concepts with the rest and bring in Keon and some of those other things, I think that's where they could be really good. But yeah, I think Keegan will learn a lot, honestly, from DeMar.
It's funny, you talked earlier about going back and watching games from last season to help kill the time. I imagine I could find 2 or 3 games where Keegan got off to a really, really strong start, and then the Kings, for some reason, went away from him, or he had a really good first half and then a quiet second half. I think a large portion of that responsibility is on Mike Brown and the Kings themselves to not emphasize continuing to feed him. Now, they did that well in that 47-point explosion that Keegan had, so we know it can work. But I also think a lot of that also falls on the shoulders of Keegan to, hey, if you've got it, demand it. And I think that's going to be more important this season than ever, because now you got another future Hall of Famer on this roster. There's only one ball and a lot of guys that can do a lot with it on this roster. So I think it's going to be a part of Keegan Murray's growth this year too, J. Ross, is going to be, hey, I'm on it tonight. Feed me. Like, run me off the ball. Give me some off-ball screens. Find a way to keep this going. That's something that the Sacramento Kings, I don't think, have done well enough with Keegan over the last 2 seasons.
I'd agree. And I know they wanted him to be more aggressive like we talked about last year, but I still don't remember, and maybe there's a game, but I don't find myself ever there at Golden One or watching them on the road or with them on the road going, man, I wish Keegan would shoot less. Like, I don't think that thought has ever come to my mind. And I know it's upset Mike Brown to the point where he's taking him out when he's not taking the shot that's available. So what a spot to be in. I mean, no one's ever going, hey, red light on you, Keegan. I mean, he should have every green light. They want him to take more shots because he's got ability to score in a lot of different ways. And his jumper is pretty consistent. So yeah, green light, fire away.
2 more quick ones for you, J. Ross. The first one has to do with De'Aaron Fox. The Supermax contract is going to be looming kind of over him. And how he gets it is doing something that he's done before, making an all-NBA team. Now, I think making it a second time for Fox is going to be significantly harder than the first time, because first time he kind of got it because of the story. This time he has to get it because he's just straight up one of the best top 3 guards, or top 6 guards probably, in the NBA. To me, in order to accomplish that, it sounds simple, but this is a scoring league. It's just scoring. Like, I think De'Aaron Fox just needs to basically be a 30 points per game scorer, or close to a 30 point per game scorer on a nightly basis. Then we already know what he can do when he gets to the playoffs, but that shouldn't matter and doesn't matter in all NBA voting. It's just De'Aaron being a 30 point per game scorer around that. Is that oversimplified? Do you think the other things that he does and team success and stuff like that play heavily into that? Or is the scoring the most important thing for him to accomplish that?
I think for him, he's going to need the numbers. That just jumps off the page. You need people talking about you. But I think the other number that will help a lot is the team success. I mean, I think if they get to that scenario that I said, hey, they could finish first. Well, if you're first, how do you not have an all-NBA team member? Sure. And so for them to get 50-plus wins and to be the 1 seed in what everybody thinks is as talented as a West as ever, how different would his numbers be than SGA? How different would his numbers be than Luka? How different would his numbers be than Curry? Other people that kind of are regulars in that first, second, or third team, at least in the, I know it's all, but then Jaylen Brown's, then, other candidates that will be up there.
Jalen Brunson,
right.
Yeah.
Right. So what's the difference? One averaged 29. Well, the other was 27. Well, what did 4 more wins do? Like, that's kind of where the hairs will be split here. So, but he's kind of right in that sweet spot where now it's not a surprise. People know who he is. So it's not like, hey, I don't think De'Aaron, like, I'm not used to that name. You become an all-star. You're thought of like for the next Olympic team. People have talked about him there as an all-NBA type. It's almost like you have to have a down year for them not to think about you. So I think De'Aaron is thought of all the time now when you think of the Kings. And if he has a good year and they win a lot, he's going to get consideration.
Finally, I'm of the belief, I'm in the camp of just start Malik Monk. Put your best foot forward. And it's funny, I tell people that is who I would pick. And that's also would be the guy that I'm most surprised to get the spot. Just knowing Mike Brown and how much Mike loves Malik with the second unit. The one thing that I think is a non-negotiable is Malik Monk played 26 minutes a game last year. That number has to be in the 30s. He's so important. He's obviously going to be on the floor to close games unless you need the Keon Ellis defense or something like that. But for the most part, Malik Monk is one of the 5 best players on this Kings team. He was a top 3 player last season. if I have any gripe with Mike Brown, and you know how much I love that man, it's you got to play Malik Monk more.
That is the simplest and correct answer to me too. And I've been of the camp, and everybody said this for 100 years, was like, it doesn't matter who starts, it's who finishes, and Malik's generally on the floor at the end. But I went to the minute total too, Matt, last year, and I looked at it and I went, Harrison Barnes, sorry, you should not have played more minutes than Malik Monk per game. He shouldn't have.
Right.
So I don't care who starts, but I think inherently when you start the second half too. And yeah, you'll go out of the game, but then you're probably getting a second run. Maybe Malik gets one run in the first half and one run in the second half. As a starter, you generally get two. And then maybe the minutes get separated a little bit differently, but I just think you generally play more minutes as a starter. So I don't think he has to, but if that's what's going to get Mike Brown to play in more minutes, then I think he should. But I think you said it perfect. I mean, Mike Brown started you and me over him. Like, he would start anybody but Malik last year. There were so many guys hurt, and he just refused to start him. And there's obviously, I think, his own reasoning behind it. But if that's the case, if Mike Brown brings him off the bench again, I'm okay with that. But that minute total, I'm going to watch that because he's got to live as close to 30 as possible, because at the end we can look at all the depth and all the bench guys, but my stance, Matt, on this year's team is, and I think you would agree, at least on the top players. So if we're going Malik, Keegan, DeRozan, Fox, Sabonis, I'm just going to stick with those five. And there's others, but those five, if those five play the season, miss a game or two, but not 30 games.
Sure.
And play 30-plus minutes, I do not know how this team won't be good. Now, what's good? Define that, but this will be a good team. If you get, let's go 65 or more games for those five, and they play 30 minutes, how are they not good?
Right. Even with how difficult the West is. Yeah.
And maybe that's sixth. Maybe that's sixth, and they squeak in, but you're in, and there's no mystery. But I don't know where that lands them. But if those guys are good, and no offense to Lyles or Keon or whoever else will play a role, they need all of them. But that's the group that the top level, they do the heavy lifting. And if they're all good, it's going to be a good year.
I can't wait. I'm ready to see it, J-Roz. I'm ready to actually see it and stop talking about it. My friend, thank you for making the time here. I will see you at Media Day coming up very, very shortly. And then Kings basketball will be here before we know it. So thank you for everything that you do. All
right. So I got a idea for you. You're missing your basketball. What if we have a double header? We come over, you come over, I come over. We watch basketball, and then Lord of the Rings.
That is the greatest thing you've ever said to me. And I know you're just saying it for the audience, but you don't actually mean it. But I'm going to cherish it and pretend that this is genuine from you.
Okay. No, I've changed the thing. Here we go. You have one TV and one TV only. And it can either show you Lord of the Rings or Lord of the Kings. What are you watching?
Well, Lord of the Kings doesn't exist.
Well, you know what I mean. I was just going off a thing. It sounded good.
Well, okay. I make money and have a career based off of one. Kings basketball is my first love. So I'll always watch a current Kings game over the Lord of the Rings, because the Lord of the Rings is always there for me, baby. It's not going anywhere. It's always there. It can fill 12 hours of my life.
I'm saying it goes away. There's no Lord of the Rings or there's no Kings.
That's not fair. That's like making me choose between the Kings and my child. That's not fair.
Well,
what? Oh God, we got to end the episode here. Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
Technical difficulties.
Thank you, J-Roz.